Hey, yo, what's going on, you guys? We have a brand new episode of Buy or Bust for you guys today. We're going to be talking about Kahhori. We're going to be talking about 3 decks, some key synergies and counters, the ceiling, the floor for this card, as well as my final verdict as well. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So in case you guys did not know, Kahhori is the brand new Series 5 card releasing on Tuesday with a 4-cost, 6 power stat line with the ability on reveal each card in your hand gives one of your cards in play +1 power. This is an ability that can hit multiple cards multiple times, meaning if you have 2 cards on the board and 6 cards in your hand, those 2 cards on the board will be hit potentially 3 and 3, 4 and 2, 5 and 1, or potentially even all 6 on 1 card. It really just depends, kind of like how Gwenpool does hit 3 targets or more potentially in your hand, depending on whatever you have on locations and what cards you have in your hand. So of course this is going to be very interesting, but you can also target this a little bit better than you can with Gwenpool, which you have with Gwenpool. Maybe you've been doing it with the spells from Agamotto to target your cards better, but I think this card's going to be very fun. This is an example of how it looks in game. So you can see there's a variety of different ways you can play it. You can either get the maximum 7 cards in your hand, so you get 7 procs of this ability, or less. It really just depends on what you build and also what you have going on in your hand at the moment. But let's go ahead and jump right into some key synergies and counters for this card. Starting off first and foremost, I'm thinking of Kate Bishop. I don't think necessarily you have to have 7 cards in your hand to be able to get the maximum value out of this card. Maybe, yes, that does give you the most and highest ceiling for this card, but I don't think you have to every single time. Kate Bishop adds 2 arrows into your hand, which allows Kahhori to give you the proc twice, just with those 2 arrows, but more often than not, you're going to have more than just 2 cards in your hand. This is just an additional buff you can use for Kahhori. I'm thinking of Sebastian Shaw being one of these targeted cards to get the buff from Kahhori as well. This card is on the board, so instead of it being in your hand and hoping that Gwenpool hits your Sebastian Shaw, this should give Sebastian Shaw the buff. And if he is one of the only cards on the board too, Sebastian Shaw can be hit multiple times. So he'll get that +1 and then the additional +2 from his stat line, which of course, you know, his ability is whenever he gains power, gain an additional 2 more power. So that really levels out with this card, and I think it's going to be really fun into Surfer. And then I also thought was Zabu. Zabu to potentially either get Kahhori out early or even get her out at the end of the game. I don't think this has to be a card you play on curve. I think it is something you can play at the end of the game in order to steal cubes as well, which is really nice. Key counters, though, of course, are going to be Shadow King. This power that you are adding to cards can be removed because this is not an ongoing effect. Shadow King does remove the added power. Of course, Cosmo as well. Cosmo would block Kahhori from being able to use her on reveal ability because it is on reveal. And then Debris. I'm saying Debris in this list because of all sorts of Clog being able to disrupt which cards of yours are able to get the Kahhori buffs. So if you have multiple rocks on your side of the board, Goblins, Acero, Titania, like all those different cards can affect where you're wanting to add power. So Clog would be a very good counter into this card. But let's go ahead and talk about the good and the bad. So the good I'm thinking with this card, the conditions are pretty easy to meet. You just have to have cards in your hand. That's all you need to be able to get this ability to work. Of course, there's going to be different, levels to it, which we'll talk about with the floor and the ceiling. But all you have to do is have cards in your hand for Kahhori to be able to give cards, of course, on the board power, since it's not going to power of cards in your hand. And then, of course, it is high power potential in the sense Kahhori is either a 4/6 if there's 0 cards in your hand, or you have 0 cards on the board, or on the top end, if you do have 7 cards in your hand, Kahhori is in a 4/13 with the distribution of power. But of course, that is the maximum high roll, and your opponent has to keep in mind your hand size when you are going to be playing Kahhori as well. So there's different kind of combo potential there, and it's a global ability. It doesn't just hit her cards in her lane, it hits the cards on the board spread out. And of course, like I was saying earlier as well, it can hit the same card multiple times, or it could hit every single card. It really just depends on what you have on the board and the RNG aspect of the card itself. And that's why I was saying it can hit the same card multiple times. The bad for this card, though, is the power is distributed based on hand size. So you do need to keep in mind how much power you're adding to the board, depending on how many cards you actually have in your hand. Are you playing this prior to a K-Bishop? If you have K-Bishop on the same turn, no, you would play your K-Bishop first, so you have extra cards in your hand for then Kahhori to be able to spread out that power. So you have to kind of keep that in mind, and it is RNG based too, so it isn't always going to hit the targets multiple times you want to hit multiple times, or necessarily hit all the targets you want to hit, because you have multiple cards on the board. So just keep that in mind prospectively. And that's what I was talking about. You can miss the cards you want to hit, especially if you're facing a clog. Some locations can disrupt that as well. But you kind of want to mitigate and like play around having Kahhori as well. The way you're distributing cards, how many cards you're playing on turn. Like just doing that in order to maximize your Kahhori as well. And this power can be Shadow Kinged as well. Shang-Chi if the power card gets too big as well. And it's potentially a bad late draw because you probably haven't set up your hand entirely for a Kahhori kind of interaction there. Not necessarily it is saying it is the worst late draw, but it's also a 4-cost. So if you don't have it Zabu, that's a 4-cost card. Playing that out at the very end of the game maybe is not something you're really trying to do. It can work, but isn't necessarily the best. But let's go ahead and jump right into the floor and the ceiling for this card. All right, moving on to the floor and the ceiling over here. If you on the maximum high end, you have the best hand ever. Your Kahhori gives you an additional 5 to 7 power, depending on how many cards you have in your hand. If you have 5 to 7 cards in your hand, that is the maximum Kahhori value you could get. Which, of course, I don't think you have to hit this every game to get value with this card. But if you do, that is really solid. On the low end, though, you play it out with maybe 1 or 2 cards in your hand, which I think, like, you're more often than not going to have more than 1 or 2 cards in your hand, like, just logistically. Unless you're literally dumping your entire hand, like, with Black Swan, you normally end the game with a couple cards in your hand. So on the low end, you're adding 1 or 2 power to a card or multiple cards on the board. Like I said, you can hit multiple cards or 1 card multiple times. So, like, that would be, like, on the low end. And then, of course, the average, you're probably going to have 3 to 4 cards in your hands. It's a 4-6, stat line overall with all these interactions, but then you're getting 3 to 4 power on the board to 1 card or potentially multiple cards. Like, you're going to have instances where you hit the same card multiple times. I don't think necessarily you're going to have the same odds of hitting 1 card 6 times because you're going to have power across the board, but it's not impossible since it is an RNG thing. But it can happen. You're building your board around having a Kahhori interaction, which I'm thinking that's why I have like Surfer as this main first deck over here too, which is a Mystic Surfer. So like you're using Kahhori in this instance to buff your Shaw. It could buff Broods. Like it's kind of like a Nova in a sense, but not. Like if you do have an Absorbing Man maybe in here instead, you can spread out that power again, opposed to having to destroy a card to get that +1, and you're building your board accordingly, like I was saying too. You have Zabu to be able to get Galacta or Kahhori out earlier or later into the game to be able to do maybe a Kahhori into a Surfer, or you have Luna Snow also to be able to potentially throw out some more power later in the game as well too. So of course you are giving your opponent energy, but you're also having extra energy yourself. You have Hope Summers for that interaction. You have those two. You could probably go into more of a Sarah line if you would like that, and then you could do like Kahhori, Surfer, and then maybe a Forge kind of thing. Like there's so many just different routes to take with Surfer. Definitely going to be the main home I'm going to be trying Kahhori in. Not necessarily the absolute best home, but I think it adds a lot of value just adding that extra power. You guys know how good Nova is. Of course, with Nova, you know 1 power is going to every single card. But like even with Surfer, you're not playing out a lot of cards all the time. So your hand size is going to be pretty standard or pretty full for the most part because you're dropping a lot of these stuff more towards the end of the game necessarily instead of just the very beginning of the game. So it'll be interesting to see how that works. You get Shaw buffed up pretty early, would be nice. So I feel like it really has a decent home there. Next, I do think there is some Wiccan value too. With Wiccan, you're also generating a bunch of different cards your opponent has to keep up with, and you can play your Kahhori out potentially on curve as well. You have Zabu to be able to potentially get it out earlier as well to get some just extra power on the board for your opponents to keep in mind. You do have Gore in this list too because almost every card in here is an on reveal to give you some Gore value. You have Valentina generated cards, you have Iron Patriot generated cards, Kate Bishop, Mirage. So, like, there's a bunch of different ways just to have power on the board so you're not just relying on just random RNG and stuff, too. So, like, it's just going to be really interesting, and I think Wiccan's going to have a really good home just to be able to throw out this power, And then, of course, I do think Thanos. I think we have another Wiccan list here with Thanos. Thanos, you're going to have stones in your hand. You're not going to be able to play all the stones out all the time, but you can do like a Kahhori after a Mind Stone, potentially. That's 2 additional cards you have in your hand. You have the other generators from Iron Patriot, Valentina. Like, there's so many just different ways I think you can play this card that's not just specifically locked into necessarily one archetype. Like, I think you're going to want to have card generators for sure, but I don't think you have to have a bazillion card generators in the game to be able to get Kahhori value. You don't have to try and get 7 power or 6 power every single time. Even at a 4-10, like, that's pretty good. Yes, it's not going to be like, you know, a Cold Obsidian or like a Crossbones you kind of just throw in on the board. That's the raw 4-10 value. But like, this card is going to be very interesting. Even like looking at Galactus stuff, like, I think this card is value. But let's go ahead and move into the spotlight. The spotlight this week, we do have Cold Obsidian and Hydra Bob with Kahhori. It's Hydra Bob's first time returning into spotlights. It's Cold Obsidian's like second or third time returning in spotlights. And of course, Cold Obsidian is going to be a Series 4 and Hydra Bob is a Series 5. So it's a okay week to open overall. Looking at the value of these cards, of course, it's one of the last remaining potentially spotlight weeks of this season. We have potentially only like 3 this week, next week, and the following week, if the patch does go out, and we do get snap packs accordingly. But Hydra Bob is a must-have 1-drop. I will say Hydra Bob, even after the 1 power nerf, is still just an incredible card to have. I'm using him a lot in slam decks. He's just a good 1-drop to have, because his downside is if you snap, he moves, but like that forces your opponent or you to have to snap, and they have to respect the snap. So like you can kind of win games that way just with the Hydra Bob interaction. Cold Obsidian, with the nerf to Sam Wilson, definitely did drop his usage dramatically. He's still not a bad card, but you would probably use maybe some other 410s instead of using your Cold Obsidian. But if you are playing, Thanos, still is okay in Scar stuff. Maybe not your go-to Scar card for sure, because you also are looking at, Starbrand. Starbrand just is a 310 that has its downside, but you can play Enchantress in a lot of these lists, especially with the way the meta is working right now. But we were talking about on Glazer's channel too. He looks like a Ninja Turtles villain. I do like the variant there. I like the Hydra Bob variant. The Kahhori variant looks like she's the Avatar, which is really cool, or she's waterbending. Like, it's just really, really cool variant. I don't necessarily know if I'm going for it, but I think it's a solid variant. I think Kahhori is going to be more flexible when we think, but not the most flexible, of course. Cold Obsidian is going to be more niche now, but Hydra Bob is very flexible. That's why we have flexible kind of as an average number here, because I think these cards can work in a bunch of different lists, but of course Hydra Bob is very flexible. Strength-wise, I think Kahhori is going to be strong. I think Hydra Bob is a strong 1-drop, and Cold Obsidian is an okay 4-drop. So that's why we have those ratings here. But let's go ahead and move on to what I've seen the community talk about, as well as my personal ratings as well. So looking at like what the community has said, not everyone's really high on this card. They think she's going to be okay. I mean, she's a 4/6 with, upside with whatever she has the power to. She's not the most flexible. People think you have to have card generators in every single list, or a lot of card generators to be able to make this work. Where I don't think you have to have a lot of card generators to make this work, but I can see, I don't necessarily think it will get adjusted unless it is broken, which is what the community is not thinking, is she's going to be broken, whereas I think she's going to be strong. I think, you have 2, maybe 3 card generators. Like, that's not a lot of card generators to give you value. And then, like, depending just on when you play this card out, that's really just going to determine what she can add to the board and what cards you have on the board. I think she's going to be strong. It is a more targeted Gwenpool than Gwenpool. Yes, Gwenpool is a guaranteed extra 6 power to your hand, but you don't know necessarily what targets are going to get hit. Whereas with Kahhori, you can mitigate it way better and kind of almost guarantee at least one of those targets gets hit once. And like, of course, you can hit one target multiple times. Like, there's going to be some interactions where you hit one target, like I said, like 5 or 6 times. Like, that's definitely going to be a thing. But I do think that this card is going to be pretty solid, which is why I'm saying for you guys to buy this card. This card's going to be good. If you're missing Hydra Bob, you should totally open this week at least for Hydra Bob. This is another bonus card you can get if you don't have Hydra Bob as well, too. I think this card's going to get value. You're going to see this in a variety of different lists. Iron Patriot is already so freaking popular. So even with Iron Patriot, that's an additional 1 card in your hand, which is an additional 1 power onto the board. I think you're going to be able to get a lot of value with this card, and I think she's going to be solid. But I do want to say, at the end of the day, right? Play what you want to play. Get the cards that you guys really want to get and that you guys do enjoy. I've been wrong about cards. The community's been wrong about cards. So it really boils down to, honestly, being patient, waiting, see where this card lands. We do have an OTA on this Thursday as well. So keep that in mind prospectively. Things can change. The meta can shift. So maybe even waiting for the weekend or a few days after before getting Kahhori could be the move, just to see where this card lands. She may not work as intended. We have, of course, looked at it and seen in the dev video that she seems like she's going to be pretty solid. But good cards do get nerfed. Bad cards do get buffed. Good cards get buffed. Bad cards get nerfed. It's really interesting the way we do some of this meta stuff right now. But at the end of the day, I'm very excited to see where Snap is going. I really do appreciate you guys hanging out and watching the video today as well. Let me know down below, what are your guys' thoughts on Kahhori? Let me know if I am totally wrong, or let me know if you guys totally agree. But I really do appreciate you guys watching the video. Until the next time, please make sure you guys like and subscribe. I'll be playing some Kahhori on her release day as well. If you guys want to check that out, that'll be live on Twitch. That'll be down in the description below. But until the next time, it's been real. God bless, and Tucker out.